Good morning, everyone. I was so excited to find out that this month's theme for worship was theology, what do we believe? Because I have had the beginnings of this sermon living rent-free in my head for years and just have not had the impetus to actually finish it until now. So if you've been a YoU for any amount of time or ever been around a YoU before, you know that we love to spell things with double U's and have acronyms including the double U's. So from the fairly straightforward, like the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, which is our denomination, UUSC, or the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, to the more creative Trust, Equal Access, and DRUM, our faith-based organizations really have led the way with this. If we go to the next slide, you'll also see some amazing event names like Dungeons and Drag Cons, a spooktacular fundraiser, or incomprehensible names for youth groups like Wussy G. So when I tell you that I'm a UUUUU, yes, that's 5 U's, I think you'll agree with me that I win at our faith. By the way, if there's a prize, I would love for it to be in books. Another very UU thing as well, so just to really make it clear that I win. But jokes aside, this identity means a great deal to me. You see, all those U's stand for ultra universalist, Unitarian Universalist. And they have guided me on my faith journey for quite a while now. I became a UU about 10 years ago and just dove right in. I now work for the UUSC, and I'm on the path to Unitarian Universalist ministry. But before either of those things happened, I started to read everything I could about our faith, because for so long, I yearned for a spiritual home, but didn't really feel like I fit into any particular denomination. I even read about the history of Unitarianism and Universalism, and that's where I learned about ultra-universalists, and that was where the reading came from. So as you may know, Universalists were considered heretics because they believed in universal salvation, that a truly benevolent God would never send someone to hell for eternity. However, there was a controversy within that group even. Restorationalists believed that there was some time of punishment for bad behavior after death, but that eventually everyone would be restored to God. The other side were the ultra-universalists, like Hosea Ballou, who didn't believe that a benevolent God would create any kind of hell, and that the only hell that exists is what we sometimes create together here on earth. I still remember when I had the realization that I was an ultra-universalist, because I don't believe in the Christian idea of hell or heaven. I believe that the only heaven or hell that exists is what we create together here on earth. And that's what became the basis for my personal theology and clarified for me that the one question I need to ask myself every day is, do I want to be part of creating more heaven or more hell? Now, some of you may believe in some form of heaven or hell, which is fine. You know, you're a UU. You can still be a UUUUU if you want. Because all it takes is acknowledging that we don't actually know what happens after we die. There may be a heaven or a hell. There may be Valhalla or purgatory. We might be reincarnated, or there could be nothing. What we do know is that we have an effect on this world. In fact, that is why Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal rather than a creedal relationship. Religion, relationship, same thing. We believe the most important thing we can do is to live together in the here and now with joy, peace, and justice. And we're trying to find ways to do that together. We strive to create the beloved community, which is basically heaven on earth. So no matter what you believe happens after we die, you too can be a UUU and win at this faith. But let's get into a little more detail. If we're committed to making this world more like heaven with our actions, we should probably think about what heaven on earth looks and feels like. So often in Christian theology, you hear that heaven is perfect, And the physical description ranges from a bunch of angels hanging out in clouds to somewhere where everyone has a mansion and is blissfully happy at all times. I have an issue with a lot of that. Because the reality is, first, that something can only be perfect for one person at any time. Perfection is authoritarianism. I know that's a strong statement. For example, a perfect heaven for me gives me plenty of time and space alone, or more accurately, with just my dog Nova, lots of travel, and some quality time with my loved ones. However, Nova's perfect heaven is where we are always together, no exceptions, and everyone else that she loves lives with us. So basically, my nightmare. For others in my life, their perfect heaven may include me being with them more often than my introversion requires, and for others, maybe their perfect heaven means that I don't even exist. Here at First Parish, we've often said that we don't strive for perfection, but for authenticity and connection, because that is what heaven or the beloved community or whatever you want to call it is. It's not perfect. Some of the times in my life when I felt the most connection have not been particularly happy times for me either. Maybe heaven isn't when you are always perfectly happy, because that's too shallow of an existence. In 3 days, and I'm sorry if I start crying for this, it will be the 2nd anniversary of my mother's death. Her passing at age 62 from brain cancer was one of the hardest things I've ever experienced. And I was able to be with her when she took her last breath. I was able to hold her hand and tell her everything would be okay and that we loved her. And I got to hear her last words, which were, "I love you too." After she passed, I slipped into a deep grief and could barely take care of myself. My best friend and my father flew down to where I was with my siblings, and they made sure we survived. When I returned home, my community made sure that I could take the time I needed to grieve without having to worry about practical things like what I would make for dinner. Those days weren't happy for me, but they were heaven. Everyone who supported me in that time gave me a piece of heaven here on earth. A few weeks ago, when I got a card from Therese and the caring team here at First Parish honoring the difficulty of this time of year for me, this community gave me another piece of heaven. Those things might not seem like a lot, but you can imagine if more and more people honored the fullness of life, prioritized authenticity and connection, and responded to pain with compassion and love, what this world could look like. I think about what's been happening in Israel and Gaza right now as a bigger example of what I'm talking about here. There is both heaven and hell being created there. Hell is killing Jews for just being Jewish and Palestinians just for being Palestinian. Hell is bombing refugee centers and shutting down access to food, water, and electricity. Heaven is inside all the people across the planet, including Jews and Muslims, who have called for and achieved a ceasefire or pause. It's inside all the people who are calling for a just and immediate, permanent peace in the area that allows for the full humanity of all who live there. Heaven exists as we have the difficult conversations about this conflict, whether we are Jewish, Muslim, Christian, YoU, or something else. When we have the conversation in a way that honors the complexity of the issue, of the overlapping oppressions that have resulted in so much pain and death. Heaven is when we refuse to boil this issue down to something simple, where there is a perfect right side to be on. I guess what I really want to get across to everyone is that heaven is complex. It's hard to achieve. Like most worthwhile things, it requires effort from us because we can go either way as human beings. We could go more towards heaven or more towards hell. Heaven is a practice. It's using those long spoons to feed your neighbor. It's something that we have to achieve over and over again by rising to our best selves and for forgiving ourselves and each other when we inevitably fall short. Heaven is when we resist the dehumanization of anyone, even when it feels scary to do so. Heaven is when we think of a ridiculous sermon title that makes us laugh to ourselves and then finally get the chance to preach it. It's when we spend some time supporting our trans and gender-expansive beloveds as they're relocating to our safer state. Heaven is when we donate money to their relocation or to free someone from immigration prison. Heaven is when we bring someone a meal after they've been sick or injured or just lost someone they loved. Heaven is when we gather together to celebrate Pi Day like we did last week and are almost bursting at the seams of Durgan Hall. So now it's your turn. Last week, we saw that God is different things for different people, and heaven is different things for different people. So I want you to take a few minutes to think about what is heaven on earth for you. It can be big or small, because really even the small pieces of heaven are huge. You could think about a time when someone gave you a piece of heaven during a hard time, or when you felt like you were able to give someone a piece of heaven when they needed it. You could think about the best day of your life or one of the hardest. You could think of something else completely. As you do that, hopefully you came in and grabbed one of the paper cutouts that I have provided in the front and a pen or pencil. If you haven't, please raise your hand and we can get you one. Thank you. And as that's happening, I invite you to soften your gaze or close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and think about what a piece of heaven looks like, feels like to you. And there's no rush here, but when you're ready, write down something from your heaven on the cutout. It doesn't have to make perfect sense, right? There's no perfect. Or be in a full sentence. I'm going to ask that you keep that with you for now, and when you go into coffee hour or before you leave, I ask that you leave your piece of heaven at one of the tables where you aren't sitting or standing. Share your heaven while others share theirs with you. And know that we always have the opportunity to create a little piece of heaven on earth when we're together, authentically and imperfectly. Friends, I invite you to join me in being an ultra universalist, Unitarian Universalist. To find joy in silly things even as we strive to resist the forces that would create more hell on earth. To show up for each other and even for those we don't particularly like sometimes. To gather together, take risks for justice, embrace difference, and give back. To see how many YoUs you can YoU. Amen, Ashe, and let it be so.